Hello and welcome to Zestology, the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton, and for the last couple of weeks I've been in LA at the Biohacking Conference in Pasadena. And today's podcast is all about a topic that came up a lot at that conference, and it is the subject of light as a drug. Because when you're in LA, it's very easy. You go out in the morning, you got loads of sunlight, and it's just beautiful. But you get back to London, and it's a damp, dark, fairly grey October day as I walk around the park, and to be honest, there's not that much natural sunlight to be had. So a lot of the speakers, a lot of the exhibitors at the Biohacking Conference were talking about the power of light, the power of sunlight to rejuvenate us and protect us from disease, and also the power of artificial light in a negative sense, because apparently some of our devices, the iPads and the iPhones and the handheld mobile devices that we have around our home and the kind of lights that we have in our home are 5 times brighter than natural daylight, which means if you're looking at these devices at night, it can have a real impact on your sleep. So I'm speaking to someone today on Zestology who can help us use light to our advantage. Scott Nelson is a man well qualified to talk about this, because he and his brother-in-law, I think you'll hear in this podcast, have basically invented a light device that can hack your energy levels and help you utilise light to its advantage rather than disadvantage. And this invention of theirs is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you'll hear more about it in the podcast, but when I switch it on in my flat, it's so bright it feels like nuclear war has broken out. In a good way. If there is a good way for nuclear war to break out. So today's podcast is all about light. It was a real theme at this biohacking conference, as you'll hear in other podcasts that are coming up over the next month or so, including with the man who started the conference and hosted the conference, Dave Asprey of Bulletproof, and other guests as well. So today's podcast is all about light on Zestology. Hope you enjoy it. Here he is, Scott Nelson. Right, we're recording. Scott, how you doing?
Good, Tony. Pleasure to be sitting here on this beautiful morning.
Yeah, it's just been a great conference, hasn't it? And,
it has been, yeah.
It's Sunday morning. I think we should set the scene, actually. It's Sunday morning, and it's 8:30, and we've got a bulletproof coffee, and we're sitting outside the Pasadena Convention Center. And I think it's quite nice because we're going to talk about light and the impact on light on the human body, and light almost as a drug, which has been a bit of a theme of this podcast. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting in this incredible Californian light, aren't we?
We are, yeah. It's beautiful, beautiful morning, and ideal to get morning sun at this time of day. So couldn't be better to be having this type of conversation.
Now, Scott, where do you live normally?
We're based in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Is that a hot place?
It is not. It's the summers are great, but the summers are short. Okay. And so right now we're probably 50 degrees as a high.
Right.
And then
well, that's like London. But you're wearing a hoodie. I was like, this is like the hottest we ever get.
I brought my Minneapolis gear to California, but it's nice right now. But you get some nice heat out here during the midday. So I'll probably drop the hoodie here in a few hours.
Yeah, drop the hoodie. It gets a bit cold inside.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Good. So one of the themes of this conference has been light as a drug, which is quite an interesting phrase that I've never heard before. Mm-hmm. The impact of light on the human body. And I think it's just something that we do not think about very much at all. You're very well qualified to tell us about this. And perhaps first we could just look at why light impacts us in different ways.
Sure, absolutely. And so to your point, I think there's a lot more awareness around the importance of light, and certainly we've heard that at the Bulletproof Conference here. But to your the phrase you mentioned, light almost as a drug. There's another fairly well-known doctor, Jack Kruse, who actually I think the phrase he uses is light as a compound pharmacy, quote unquote compound pharmacy. So light is clearly important, and the way I typically like to the analogy I typically like to use is that most people are familiar with how our bodies metabolize macronutrients, so fats, proteins, carbohydrates, etc. But most people aren't familiar with how our bodies metabolize light. And so different wavelengths of light have different have different impacts at a cellular level, and how our bodies receive that type of light, those wavelengths of light, and how we digest them. And so light is crucial, and I think so much of us, I mean, you can probably testify to this, is we've sort of been ingrained that sunlight is bad. make sure before you go out in the natural sun, slap on the sunscreen, because we don't want that type of light. But in actuality, if you look at the science, light is incredible. UV light, too much UV light obviously can be, you can experience some downstream ramifications. But light in and of itself is pretty powerful, especially with certain wavelengths.
So, sunlight's the obvious one to start with.
Yeah.
What? I mean, I kind of feel like I know, but I kind of feel like I don't know. What
Sure.
good happens when you go in the sunlight?
Right. So sunlight, it's you're experiencing a really broad spectrum of wavelengths of light. Some have different impacts, and so red and near infrared light, those wavelengths from the broad spectrum of sunlight, have a unique ability to enhance the cellular production of ATP, which is kind of the energy currency of our cells.
And this podcast is all about energy, so
exactly,
that's good.
Exactly. Yeah. And so red and near infrared light, but that's just a small percentage of the wavelengths from the broad spectrum of sunlight. And I think most people are familiar with UV light and the potential dangers of overexposure to UV light, but also UV light has a unique ability to help our bodies produce vitamin D as well. And so that's crucial for most people. I mean, you could get into some serious health problems, with vitamin D deficiency. And so those different wavelengths of light from the full spectrum of natural sunlight are pretty important for different aspects of our health.
So sunlight, obviously, we'll put that in the good column.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at, one of the things I've been talking about is I work at a TV station in the UK. It's a fantastic job. It's all, and the lighting on set is it's quite. It's morning. It's quite a kind of. It's great, isn't it? Everyone's so friendly here. Morning. The light it's very flattering light, but it's an artificial light. What is the impact of if we're going to work in an office and it's strip lighting and it's dark outside?
Right.
Presumably, that's in the negative camp in terms of the impact on our body.
Right, and there's been a lot of technology specific to green energy and more efficient light sources. LEDs being one of those. Right. I think it's pretty, at least here in the States, it's pretty hard to source incandescent light bulbs anymore, just because you go to the local department store and almost every single choice you have is LED lighting. LED lighting is great from an efficiency standpoint, but oftentimes those sources are delivering blue light as well at the same time. And so blue light can be good in the morning to help reset your circadian rhythm, but an overexposure to blue light throughout the day, and especially at night, is not ideal. Can help to too much exposure at night can impact your sleep in a negative way. And so going to an office or going to a well-lit studio like yourself, just a good idea to probably step outside and try to get some natural sunlight during the day to help counterbalance some of the downstream ramifications of that LED lighting that's delivered through those sources.
And you talk about blue light, of course. That's the iPad at night in bed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably the bathroom light as well.
Yep, exactly. And so most people, when they think they look at LED, it looks white, but the reality is there's multiple wavelengths being delivered from those LED sources. It's not just bright light. There's blue light coming from those sources as well. And blue light during the day and overexposure to blue light can have some downstream health ramifications, especially if you're getting too much of it.
And at night, your body thinks it's the middle of the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it'll suppress melatonin production, which you absolutely need heading into if you're trying to optimize for your sleep. And so if you've got your device without some sort of
night mode,
night mode or something like that, or even
it's quite good that night mode, isn't it?
Yeah,
on the iPhone. I use it.
I keep it on almost throughout the day, unless I'm trying to look at how an image is pixelated or something like that. I'll flip it off, but I keep that on almost throughout the entire day. And then heading into the evening, I think there's even more apps that you can buy, screen protectors, screen filters, Iris being one of those, that even help to reduce the blue light even more so than just the night mode alone.
Iris?
Yes.
Is
Iris.
that an app?
It is. It's an app.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you should check into it.
This is great.
I've heard. I personally have limited experience with it, but I've heard great things with kind of more techie people that are actively kind of playing around with it. So allegedly, it blocks out a significantly greater amount of blue light at night than just the night mode alone. Exactly.
Because night mode is still quite bright.
It is.
Wow, that's really cool. Okay, I'm going to check that out. I've not heard about that before.
Yeah, there's a couple different apps besides that one.
Yeah.
But I've heard that's a pretty good one.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've talked about before on Zestology, I did a Zest hacks recently on blue blockers, and I've been trying out different blue blockers, and they are big here as well, aren't they? People are wearing, and for people who don't know, these are glasses that block out the blue light at night, so your brain during the day kind of sees all this blue light and thinks it's sunlight. If your caveman brain at night sees the blue light, it thinks it's the middle of the day and doesn't want to go to sleep. So these orange glasses are the colour of the campfire, and it blocks out the blue light. I found them quite helpful. Do you use them?
We do. Our kids use them. My wife uses them. Yeah, I use them, and that's one of the few biohacks. We're here at the biohack, the Bulletproof Biohacking Conference. That's one of the few where I notice like a significant difference when I wear them versus when I don't wear them. When I have them on at night, I will experience a lot more drowsiness, which is great. Heading into prepping your body into
so cool.
for a night's sleep. Yeah. So
do you use it every night?
We do. Yeah, I use them every night.
I know you brought your kids on this trip.
Exactly.
Did you bring the glasses?
They do. Yeah, they've got the glasses as well. And we saw James Swanwick, walking around earlier, and I did a podcast actually recently with him too.
And so we wear the Zestology
we wear the Swannies blue blockers at night. But yeah, they're great. I couldn't recommend them highly enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I have them, and I must admit I don't use them that much. I've got what I think are the most stylish pair on the market. Still not sure they're that stylish, but they look okay.
Yeah.
The retro look to them.
But it is interesting. You see a lot of people even walking around the conference here in Pasadena with with those on. I mean, they're pretty popular here in the States.
Yeah. And then I've noticed that Dave's actually brought out his own brand of blue blockers now, including the ones that I'm interested in, the ones for during the day. I'm not quite sure what frequency of light they block out, but I think he was talking about how they block out the kind of the negative elements of strip lighting or something like that. Yeah,
I'm not overly. I can't speak to his glasses to a great extent, but I do believe I think they may be blocking out green light. I believe, which is a different wavelength. So, kind of back to your original question, all of these different wavelengths, blue, green, red, near infrared, they all have different impacts, on at a biological level, and how our bodies are receiving that type of light. So, it's definitely an interesting sort of arena, this concept of light. But yeah, I couldn't speak to Dave's glasses exactly, but I'm sure there's probably some science there as to what he's doing there and kind of the message he's trying to get across.
And I guess the best thing to do, ideally, would be to get our circadian rhythms. So basically, when it gets dark, we go to bed.
Exactly.
But I don't want to do that, really.
Yeah, it's tough for most people. But yeah, a good morning dose of natural sunlight. Reset, that blue light, along with the near infrared light. There's an especially high concentration of that in the morning from as the sun rises. That blue light helps to reset your circadian rhythm. That near infrared light almost acts to help almost recharge your cells, prepping them for the potential for the reception of the UV wavelengths during the middle of the day when the sun is most intense. But then as the sun rises, there's a lot more red and near infrared light delivered from the sun at that point as well. But yeah, when you think about ancestral living, I think our ancestors spent a fair amount of time almost prepping themselves for nighttime. They didn't have to worry about all of these artificial sources of light, and there was a good block of time as they went into their sort of their nighttime ritual where they almost prepped their bodies for sleep, and it's just most of us don't do that anymore. And so
the only light was the fire or the moon.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly. And so when you think about that, that's really hard to achieve in this type of environment. So all of these little hacks, kind of help to get us over the hump. If we don't have that 2 or 3 hours to prep for a good night's sleep.
That's really cool. I am going to start using the light blockers a little bit more in the evening.
Yeah.
I haven't tracked it, but I don't know that I've noticed a significant difference in my sleep when I use them. But you have.
I have, and I wouldn't say I personally am not overly sensitive to light or different frequencies, but that legitimately is one of kind of the few biohacks that I do notice a significant difference when I wear those at night for sure. Yeah. So
now let's get into the geeky bit, which is what I've been looking forward to.
Sure.
And you've been a health podcaster since 2009, haven't you? And you've been a health entrepreneur since when?
2007, 2008.
Oh, right, okay,
yeah, it's a little bit before then. Yeah.
And now you've started a company which is based on light.
Sure.
Haven't you? So, and I've tried the Juve. I'm lucky enough to have my own one now. I've tried it twice because it arrived just before I came away.
Yeah.
I'll tell you my experience of it in a second, but tell me about the company and what you're trying to do with light.
Yeah, so we started Juve almost 2 years ago now. Myself, my wife, my sister-in-law, and brother-in-law. So kind of a family, a true family.
Yeah, that's cool.
True family. Yeah, it's been fun. But
do you have to get funding, or you just do it all yourselves?
No, we're entirely bootstrapped by intention.
Wow.
I have my entire background before starting Juve is in the medical device, medtech space, and so.
What kind of things?
Pacemakers, ICDs, coronary, peripheral stents, thrombectomy, atherectomy catheters. So,
right.
kind of your typical invasive kind of procedures that are often done in the traditional hospital setting. So,
my brother-in-law sells colostomy bags.
Okay, there you
He
go.
said when he was growing up, he never dreamt that was going to be his job, but he does love it.
He likes it, yeah. And there's fun aspects, but yeah, that's my background is kind of traditional medtech or traditional medical device. So fortunately, we've been able to bootstrap this company so far. So no outside funding. And have experienced probably a faster growth than we even expected. So which has been a nice problem to have. But kind of going back to sort of the genesis of Juve and what we're trying to do is myself and my brother-in-law were first introduced to the concept of light therapy in the world of academia. It's referred to as photobiomodulation. We were first exposed to that through our wives. Actually, they had purchased some red light therapy. I'm using air quotes here on the podcast.
Yeah.
Red light therapy packages at a local salon. And they went consistently, almost every single day for about 8 weeks. Saw really good benefits. And then, my sister-in-law specifically asked...
For their skin?
Yeah, for their skin. They noticed, my sister-in-law specifically had some eczema that she had dealt with really since the birth of her first child. And that was almost completely resolved through red light therapy at this local spa in Minneapolis. And so she was really stoked about it, but having to go to a spa or some type of salon or a clinic can be really onerous if you want to do it on any sort of consistent basis. It's just not ideal for most people. It's just inconvenient. And so she asked her husband, who's an engineer, Justin, to try to figure something out that they could use for home. Right, and so with his, like as a typical engineer, he kind of got to work on building a prototype, and we had, he had some different initial prototypes that he had built. But as we started sort of digging into this arena of photobiomodulation, it almost became overwhelming how much science there really is in this really? Space. Yeah, it was, and
so not just for skin,
not at all, and I say that's someone like me that comes from a kind of a pure play medical device background. So I'm used to evaluating different therapeutic arenas, whether it's cardiovascular disease, peripheral vascular disease, etc. The concept of photobiomodulation is backed by arguably some of the most robust science that exists. And I would argue that even at a conference like this, photobiomodulation is supported by arguably probably the most science here out of all of these gadgets.
All the different health tech.
Yeah.
So basically, there's been loads of research into the effects of the certain type of light that far infrared, is it? And near infrared.
Near infrared and red light, yeah.
And red light.
Yep.
And there's more science for that than most things here.
Exactly,
wow.
Yeah. And just as, anecdotally, Dr. Michael Hamlin, who is a PhD professor at Harvard, runs his own photomedicine. He's a photobiologist. He runs his own photomedicine lab. He alone has published over 300 clinical studies, him alone. So that clinical studies published in peer-reviewed journals. Okay. 300 studies. I've never as many physicians.
So that's great. You must be like, thank you, Dr. Michael.
That's right.
You're doing our work for us.
Exactly. So there is some really legitimate science to this space. Although there's not a lot of awareness, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about light. Most people just aren't aware of the benefits of light, especially with certain wavelengths of light. And on that note. We talked a little bit about red and near-infrared light. There actually is a relatively narrow spectrum of light that has unique ability to enhance cellular production of ATP. So ATP, adenosine triphosphate, that's sort of the energy currency of our cells. And
right.
So specific wavelengths of light in what's called the optical window or the therapeutic window have a unique ability to activate an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase, which helps to produce ATP synthase, which is a precursor to ATP. So at the end of the day, specific wavelengths of light are actually helping to induce normal cellular function of ATP, which leads to a broad range of health benefits.
So not scientific.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't want to lose your audience.
Me there,
yeah, I didn't want to lose your audience too much.
So what does it do?
Yeah, what does it do? So I wanted to mention that because the benefits are so wide-ranging because of that core mechanism of action at a cellular level. And so everything from skin health, so like reduction of wrinkles, increased tone and texture, sort of the aesthetic benefits that I think all of us kind of enjoy, but the benefits go much deeper. And so muscle recovery, reduced joint inflammation, increased testosterone, enhanced cognitive function, increased retinal function, so increased vision. It's healthy for vision. The benefits are almost endless to kind of rattle off, but all of those that I mentioned are backed by published clinical literature, and I think that's the most important thing. This is not kind of woo-woo science. There's a lot of legitimate science to support the benefits that I just mentioned.
And it all really comes down to energy.
Energy,
doesn't it?
Yeah, energy, which is sometimes kind of hard to measure, right? For most people, you can't see it. It's hard to feel, But there's definitely legitimate science to back how important energy, specifically light energy, is to our overall health.
So it's your brother-in-law who's the engineer.
He is.
So he's trying to design this light. And how long does it take him to knock something up in the garage?
Yeah, our first prototypes actually were somewhat similar to a couple gadgets here at the conference. And what we quickly realized is that there's some important, probably three important things to consider when you look at a light therapy device. So a way to kind of hack the amount of light that you should receive during the day if you don't have adequate exposure to natural sunlight. And so those three important things are making sure that a device delivers the clinically proven wavelengths. So ideally, if it's delivering red light, it's in kind of the mid 600 nanometer range, so about 630 to 660 or so. And then the mid 800 nanometer range, which is the near infrared. And it's near infrared, and so infrared wavelengths are actually pretty broad. They range, I don't want to get too geeky here, but they range all the way from about 800 nanometers to 5,000 nanometers. And so what we're talking about here is specific to near infrared light. And so using clinically relevant wavelengths is pretty important. Making sure the device can deliver an adequate amount of energy.
So he was having to try and work all this out.
Yeah. He's
and at this point, were you thinking about a business, or was he just doing this because his wife was enjoying the treatment and wanted to help with her eczema?
Yeah, some of the first prototypes were really just for his wife. Yeah, for my sister-in-law to use at home. She saw such good benefits going to the salon that it was really just to solve her own need. And so, but the first prototypes didn't work that well. And so as we began to dig into the science, look at the clinical research, talk with folks like Dr. Hamlin, et cetera, like those three things became sort of rose to the forefront. Wavelengths are really important. The irradiance or the intensity of the light is really important, making sure that you get an adequate dose of energy. And then the treatment area. Most devices on the market are pretty small, little handheld devices, and we wanted something that could treat a much larger area of your body. And so those are kind of the three things that we tried to optimize for with our devices: wavelengths, intensity, and treatment area.
So I am lucky enough to have one of these at home now, and it arrived just before I came out here, so I've used it twice. Can I tell you, you kind of know my experience already, but I'm going to tell you my experience. Yeah. Firstly, you switch it on and it is the most incredible light. It's like nuclear war has broken out in your bedroom. It's fantastic. I mean, it's a really intense pinky red light, and it fills the whole room. You think, well, this is doing something straight away because it's on. I used it twice, and I'm not ashamed to admit, both times I did it naked, but I read online, I read Ben Greenfield, who's pretty respected biohacker and backs a lot of his work up with some rigorous knowledge and scientific studies where possible, and he said he exposes his entire body to it. And when I say his entire body, I mean every part of it. And I thought, well, I'm going to do the same thing. So I did 5 minutes on the front, 5 minutes on the back. Yeah. Both nights I used it, I slept very well. And genuinely a lot deeper. Is that something that tallies with other people? Yeah, no, that's a great point. And sometimes it's hard to tell. Is it just the light? Is this placebo? Are there other dynamics involved? And sometimes that kind of stuff is hard to sort of sort out. But there is clinical studies that support the use of this type of light therapy for enhanced sleep. And specifically, I'm thinking of a group of female Chinese basketball players that used red and near infrared light before sleep, and there's quantitative data to back
that up, that their sleep was enhanced significantly versus those that did not use light therapy. And so that's just one of many studies that showcase that this type of therapy does induce better sleep at night.
And what about exposing my balls to your lights? I mean, there's no other way to put it. That's what I was doing. Is this a good idea?
I think Ben Greenfield sort of put us on the map when it comes to using light therapy for your.
It's so catchy, isn't it? It's like everyone's going to think about.
He's great, but to his point, there is science to support the production of testosterone using light therapy. So I know Ben uses the one of our devices kind of as a big full body device. So he uses that one, and he also uses a smaller one. But yeah, he uses on a daily basis. Shining that. I think while he's working, shining it right on his right on his man parts.
Yeah, it's like shining up from below. Like on
exactly.
A chair. And what is it actually doing? Is it as simple as producing testosterone? And is that like a throwback to caveman times when they would walk around in the sun naked? I'm trying to work out how that relates to being primal.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That when you think about our ancestors, most of them walked around, without a lot of clothes on. But having said that, there's a couple different theories as to why certain wavelengths of light are increasing, or naturally increasing testosterone levels. Dr. Ali Sovajarvi, who actually hosts the Biohacker Summit over in Finland, great guy. He's actually done a fair amount of work publishing some different theories, but at the core, I think a pretty respected opinion is that these wavelengths of light are stimulating cellular activity within your Leydig cells, or the cells within your testicles. And so by stimulating that activity, you're helping those Leydig cells produce more testosterone. And so that's probably one of the most respected theory as to how light therapy or photobiomodulation helps to increase testosterone.
And my girlfriend was very excited by it as well, because she's gone, not because I was exposing my balls to your light. She wasn't excited. She was actually fairly horrified by that. She's like, put them away. For God's sake, it's disgusting. No, she's done the similar thing that your wife has done. And I think it's at Selfridges, and you go and sit with a lamp on your face. It's supposed to be good. But I did it as well. I went and did it once. I have to say, I thought it was a bit of a gimmick, actually. I didn't really get it. It's not. It wasn't red. It was a kind of a whiter light.
Okay, yeah.
But, so I don't know what it is, but but I didn't really understand what I was doing.
Sure.
And actually, I asked them. I said, could you explain a little bit more about what's going on? And they didn't really seem to know. You've quoted a lot more respectable sounding doctors, so you made it sound a lot better.
Yeah.
But in terms of the skin, that sounds quite exciting for people.
It does, and that's probably one of the areas that is supported by arguably the most clinical literature is the skin health. And granted, most of the clinical studies are pretty qualitative in nature, because it's not like you're measuring with data the amount of collagen in a cheek or something like that, right? Most of it's kind of using before and after images. Now, granted, the data is analyzed by pretty respected dermatologists and plastic surgeons, but it tends to be more qualitative in nature. But yeah, red light specifically, actually, most of that energy within the red spectrum is absorbed in the dermis and epidermis of your skin, and so by enhancing again normal cellular function in those two tissue types, you're actually helping those cells to produce more collagen, which helps to reduce reduce wrinkles, reduce fine lines, reduce age spots, etc. So that is the one area, though. The one caveat is that does require consistent usage. So most of the clinical data, the trials are over the course of 6, 8, 10 weeks, and so that typically takes a little bit longer to notice those skin health benefits. But my take on that is there's some truth to that, but also we look at ourselves every day in the mirror, so it's just harder to notice the subtle changes. But it does take some more consistent usage, and so back to kind of the consistent usage aspect. That's one of the reasons we believe light therapy fundamentally should be a home use type of product. It's hard for most people to get to a clinic, to a spa on any sort of consistent basis, and so if you can get the right type of wavelengths with the right intensity at home, that's ideal.
I'm vain enough to want to help with the skin a little bit.
I too. I
certainly don't want to do Botox.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And it sounds like it's cheaper than having done what Dave Asprey does with stem cells.
Yeah, that's right.
Getting the old stem cells injected in the face.
Although he looks pretty good. He looks
amazing.
He does. He looks pretty
like
good.
10 years younger than last year.
Oh yeah. That's definitely something I've noticed with his skin. So yeah.
I was going to say something. going to ask you something else about the Juve. I can't quite remember. That's right. I was going to ask you about being primal and the Juve. Do you think that some people would say it's not very primal sitting in front of a bank of lights?
Yeah.
It's hardly, sure, go outside naked. Is this the same as that?
Sure. No, that's a really good point. And so we would never promote the use of our lights versus natural sunlight. We fundamentally think that ideally, if you can work it into your daily routine, a good healthy dose of natural sunlight in the morning, some decent exposure throughout the day, and then ideally some more natural exposure to sunlight in the evening is great. The problem is most people just can't work that into it. We all have, day jobs, busy lives, kids, etc., activities. Just it's hard to do that on a consistent basis. So we would never say use this instead of natural sunlight. But when you look at the full spectrum of natural sunlight, and specific to the critically important wavelengths, red and near-infrared wavelengths, you're only getting about 30% of those ideal wavelengths from the natural sunlight. That's a pretty rough estimate. So, you get a really broad spectrum of other wavelengths of light from the sun. And so our devices can help just like supplementing with a protein powder or a collagen supplement or a fish oil or something like that. This is just another way to supplement your light diet, so to speak, with the right wavelengths of light. Yeah.
And then kind of in the light space or elsewhere, it doesn't have to be specifically light based. I thought because you've worked in health tech for so many years, I'd love to know the thing you're most excited about in terms of biohacking health or just technological advances that can help us live with more energy and vitality.
Sure.
Is there one thing in particular that you think is really cool at the moment?
Yeah, I'm really into, it's not necessarily a gadget per se, but I'm really into the concept of fasting and promoting autophagy. Art Devaney, I know, is a kind of widely considered sort of the one of the pioneers in the traditional paleo movement. I know he's done a fair amount of work with respect to this. Dr. Rhonda Patrick, I know, is a big proponent of fasting, but it's not necessarily a biohack or a gadget per se. It's something that we can all do for free. But I'm really interested in that space, and I think that the more awareness that's sort of that there's focused on the importance of fasting, not just on.
Do you fast then?
I routinely do intermittent fasting, so
yeah.
I try to squeeze my food consumption into about 6 hours a day or so. Sometimes it can be kind of tough with family, with kids, etc. But that's a goal for me. But I have.
And would you count a bulletproof coffee as part of that 6 hours or not?
No, I don't. I wouldn't consume bulletproof coffee and consider that fasting. So
good.
So I wouldn't consume butter or any sort of.
Oh right.
Yeah.
So then you would say that's not intermittent fasting.
I don't think so.
Because you see, I have a coffee in the morning, but I'm like, all right, it's all right. I'm still fasting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I have a cup of coffee, but it's black. Yeah, so
right.
I don't put anything else in it. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
But yeah, I would like one of my personal goals is to actually experiment more with longer fasting windows. So I want to do the 3 or 4 day prolonged water fast. I was first exposed to that actually through Tim Ferriss's podcast and what he's kind of he had mentioned when he was battling with Lyme disease. But that's the whole arena that I think is pretty interesting is fasting and the importance of fasting, especially prolonged fasting. On either a monthly basis or maybe a quarterly basis, something like that. So I think that's kind of interesting. And specific to gadgets, I'd like to see a lot more science with some of this stuff. I think this is my first time at the Bulletproof Conference, and this is certainly not a knock on the conference by no means. I think Dave does a phenomenal job with this, but sometimes you can get overwhelmed with all of the different gadgets, all of the different toys, and I'm not entirely sure how much science is actually supporting some of this stuff. So, we've met a couple other companies that are non-light related that are really into the same stuff. They really they're big proponents of science and making sure all of their products are supported by really good clinical data and clinical evidence. So that's something that's really refreshing for me, and
that's really cool.
I hope more and more companies are kind of trending in that direction.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I want to see. I am someone who is very evidence-based. I like facts. I like science.
Yeah.
I like order and reason, and I like to be shown why things work.
Yes.
And if that's the case, then I'll do it.
Yeah.
And if not, if it's a bit too hippy dippy, I'm not. I can't get on board.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I was the same way. Even first learning about light therapy and photobiomodulate, it's kind of like, what? I don't know. That seems kind of foo red. Yeah. Is it really doing much? And
well, I googled photobiomodulation. And I was like, I've never even heard of this word before.
Exactly. And so that's it's always refreshing when you meet other people that are kind of aligned in that sort of thinking, and not that you have to have a gazillion clinical studies by no means, but I think the more we see other companies kind of trend in the direction of making sure their claims or their products are tested and proven on either a scientific level or even ideally on a through published clinical literature, that's ideal.
Well, Scott, in the last half hour, the sun has actually got quite hot here. I think we're getting a good dose of sunlight.
Exactly.
For the day.
Yeah.
The final question is, what is one book that you would recommend that it might have been something that's had an impact on you, or something that people might like to read, and one tip for living with more energy, vitality and motivation? So one book and one tip, what would you go for? Yeah,
so this is completely not health related. It's a little bit more business, but one of my, and it actually is not a recent read, but I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday's work. His first book that I actually published was, what was the title of it? Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator. And so I read that back. Great title, right?
Yeah,
he's a
really
fantastic
good.
copywriter.
Yeah.
I love his work. I think his most recent was, he's a big fan of Stoicism, and he actually helped Robert Greene with a lot of...
cool.
Yeah.
I'm reading a Robert Greene at the moment.
Yeah, Ryan was instrumental in a lot of Robert Greene's books. And so I'm a big fan of Ryan. But that book in particular is just, like, it was my first kind of exposure to... deep exposure to how kind of media works, and I know you're in media, but it was just kind of I like his work and his writing style. So that's probably I'm
not a manipulator, Scott, I promise.
No.
Only a little bit.
And it was more actually how companies can try to manipulate media, and so it was just kind of a fascinating read for me.
Yeah.
So
that sounds great.
Yeah. It's just it's interesting. It's a little bit older. I think I read it back in like 2010, 2011, but it's still a great read. But So that's probably a book that sort of like
good.
I tend to gravitate towards when it comes to business. But the other
and then it was a tip. So like a tip for living with energy and vitality. Anything that you think would work for people? Yeah,
I would just we've kind of talked about this in a little bit, but I would just try to encourage everyone to every morning get a healthy dose of natural sunlight. Ideally, grounded to the earth, bare feet in the grass, something like that.
What if it's cloudy? I mean, in London it's cloudy a lot.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's the case in Minneapolis and Minnesota as well.
You're still getting daylight.
You are, yeah. You're still, even though it's not as bright, you're still getting. I mean, that the clouds are going to block a little bit of that light, but still getting some morning sunlight, ideally grounded to the earth. That's something that we haven't touched on at all. It's just the concept of grounding as well. I
just bought some of those grounded flip-flops.
Oh yeah.
They look good.
Oh, they look cool. Yeah, I saw them the other day. But yeah, that's a free tip that everyone can do. Sometimes, I myself sometimes even miss out on that, but it's just a good daily practice. Rebalances your circadian rhythm. Almost recharges your cells by kind of grounding to the earth. Totally free. Yeah. It's just a good way to start the morning as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I'm trying to think, what should we call this podcast? Something that is like going to draw people in without being too clickbaity. I'm thinking like light is a drug or something like that.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah. Light, your new pharmacist. Yeah, or something like that.
Oh, I like it.
We could probably riff a little bit about headlights.
Yeah. Think about it. Come back to me at the end of the day.
That's right.
Where can people find out more about you and about Juve as well?
Yeah. So Juve, I would encourage everyone to go to our website. I like to think that we do a pretty good job of providing a lot of education on there. So Juve, J, 2 O's, 2 V's. So Juve.com. If you're into science, there's a little navigation tab called Learn, and that's where all of our content that's all sourced by published literature specific to light. So go to that tab if you're really into the science. If you want to stay high level, actually go to the reviews. We've got close to 100 reviews on there. You'll hear from customers that have purchased our device unsolicited in their own words what they think of it. So if you want to kind of stay high level, it's kind of fun to kind of scroll through there and see how light has impacted people in different ways than far greater than we even expected.
Yeah, and talking of reviews, when I get back, I'll be able to use it in the depths of the English winter.
That's right.
For a month or two.
Yeah.
So I'll get back to you, and
Would love to hear back.
like report back on how it goes.
Yeah, would love to hear back. Yeah, ideal time, to be using, especially as we had same thing with where we're from in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're heading into the dearth of winter, and so it's that much more challenging to get natural sunlight. Yeah.
Might just daily dose for my balls. It's going to be wonderful.
That's right. Your girlfriend's going to be happy, I think, at the end of the day.
Might be the end, actually.
Exactly.
Scott, thanks so much. It's been really fun chatting to you.
Absolute pleasure, Tony.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
And thanks again to Scott Nelson of Juve. Definitely worth checking out their website as well, because those lights are pretty cool. In fact, since I recorded that podcast, I got back last week from Los Angeles, and I've used the light a few times. Now, the jury is still out, and I want to use it more before I actually kind of give you the definitive verdict on what I think of it. But I think I've used it 5 times, and my sleep has been extraordinarily good every time. In fact, this is the first time ever that I've had no jet lag. No jet lag at all after a transatlantic flight. And a West Coast flight as well. Now, was that because of the Juve, or was it because I was wearing the blue blocking glasses on the way home, or was it because I fasted, or was it just because I was in a good place and I'd done loads of exercise and had a nice holiday? I don't actually know, is the answer. But it does feel like that light is doing something. So let me know how you get on with utilising light as a drug. It is, as I say, a fairly grey day here in London, and I feel like I could definitely learn from the various different ways that we talked about using light as a drug in this podcast. As always, I would love you to share this podcast with someone you think might enjoy it. And if you haven't joined the almost secret Zestology book club on Facebook, almost, because I think you can kind of find it, but just not many people know about it, then type in Zestology book club on Facebook and come and join that, and we put all the book recommendations from the podcast on there. Thanks for listening. Next week, Dave Asprey, more biohacking stuff recorded at the Bulletproof Conference. I'm not certain, but I'm pretty sure this was the only podcast interview that he recorded on another podcast during the whole conference. And it's coming next week on Zestology. See you then.